Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind Games, where we discuss video games through the lens of the Christian humanities. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. Hey there, welcome to the beginning of our series on the Mass Effect trilogy. This is something that we've been talking about doing for a while, but I've finally gotten around to the games myself after picking them up on the last Steam sale. And so now we're equipped to make this happen. We have a couple special guests joining us today that you'll meet momentarily. But I do want to let you know up front that we're having some technical issues here. Before we even got started, I was struggling with my webcam, with my microphone, my internet. But finally got all that situated and we got rolling. But even still, there were just a couple times where my internet cut out for just a little bit. We're going to see that one of our guests, Megan, her internet cut out a little bit. She was dealing with some hotel Wi-Fi, and so if sometimes you just see us kind of glitch out a little bit, or it sounds like there's a brief skip in the conversation, then that's what's going on here. But most of it's fine. And then at one point, even my light bulb burned out behind me. So if you're watching the video, I just go dark all of a sudden. But that's okay. It ended up being a good conversation, and I guess the technology turning against us, it kind of goes along with the vibe of the conversation. All right, let's go ahead and get to it. All right, welcome to the latest episode of Mythic Mind Games, where we're just continuing to talk about significant games, and I use that word intentionally. That a ongoing thesis of this project that we're doing is that there is artistic value in games, that they play something like the role of a myth, right? Where like a good game, a compelling game, it provides a story, the kind of story that you can enter into, that, and it's not always going to be super clear cut, like what is the message, at least in something that's really, I think, worth engaging with. That especially when you're dealing with something like Mass Effect, like we're doing today, that there's so many different angles that you can use to analyze, what are you going to take kind of on face value? What are you going to take symbolically? Like, I think there are a lot of different ranges as to like what we can get out of this. And so I think this has the potential to be a good conversation here. Now, we have a number of people joining us today. It's one of the larger panels we've had for at least a few episodes now. We have Ian and David returning with us, and if you've been watching for a while, if you've been listening for a while, then you're already familiar with them. But we also have three new voices that have not been on the show before, and so I'd love just to do brief introductions. Tell us something about whatever you want to say about who you are, what you have to plug, that sort of thing. And so we've got, let's see, is it Kittrick, Callis? We've got renowned author Michael Kane, renowned medievalist Megan Maldonado. So I'll just hear a little bit about you and something you have to plug if you have that. Kittrick, why don't you start us off?
Okay, hi. You guys can call me Kit. Well, I'm a gamer. I'm a movie watcher, TV watcher. Me and my buddy just recently started a podcast that's looking into the Oscars and everything that's been put out there and trying to see how that maps through culturally with just its impact with everything. Yeah, I would say Mass Effect. Played it on disc way back in college. Stayed up very, very late, many a night. So I'll explain a little more about that later.
Sure, wonderful. And so that podcast you have that's currently ongoing.
Yes, yes. It's just brand new, pretty much. So we're still getting our fingers.
What's it called?
It's called The Academy's Captive Audience.
All right, Megan, tell us a little something about yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Megan Maldonado. I'm a PhD candidate in English and comparative literature. I am a casual gamer. I have done some analysis. I've even presented at conferences on medievalisms in video games because medieval literature is my specialty. And that's also what I talk about on my YouTube channel and on my X account. Both tags are at Megievalist, so medievalist, but with my name, Evalist is the made up spelling, my made up word, I think. But why I'm here today is because I love Mass Effect. And I do think there are some elements of medieval romance or the romance epic to the way that the narrative plays out. But I love the game, love the trilogy. I played it a lot in high school. It's kind of when I discovered it. And yeah, I am I have so much to say about it to anyone who will listen. I always recommend it to people who are still discovering it even today, which I think is great. So that's why I'm here.
Oh, I have to ask, are any of those conference presentations available anywhere?
Ooh, no, it wasn't recorded. The talk I gave at the International like Kalamazoo Medievalist Conference, but this was on The Witcher 3, especially the Wild Hunt or the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the DLC that comes in kind of at the end of the game. You have this era. Anyway, I have a video actually where I give a very succinct version of this talk that I gave, where I ask if The Witcher 3 is a medieval game. So you can find that on my channel and watch it many times to give me lots of views.
Wonderful. Yeah, we might to revisit that at some point. I haven't played the Witcher series, but I just picked it up on the Steam sale, so we'll see how that goes. And that's really my thing right now. I'd stopped playing games for a decade or so, for the most part, just doing other stuff. And so now I'm catching up on some things. Whenever there's a Steam sale, I stock up on my next my next set of I guess podcast series. So that's how I end up with Mass Effect. All right. Michael, tell us something about yourself.
I am the author of the science fiction Western series After Moses. I am 5 books in, almost done with the sixth, which will be the final book in the series. You can check me out at michaelfkane.com or on Twitter at michaelfkane. My day job, I'm on staff at my church. I am the music guy down in rural Arkansas. I am a nerd through and through. I write sci-fi, but I'm more of a Tolkienist at heart. But I don't think I could write that as well, so I stuck to something I thought I could write. And yeah, lifelong player of games. Although with little kids, it's a little less common now. So I managed to replay the first few hours of Mass Effect One this week just to give myself a bit of a reminder of something I hadn't gotten to play in a couple of years.
No, I should say that as a reference back to our spat on X for how to class Star Wars. And I know
Sure,
that
sure.
I know that Megan is on Team Fantasy here, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is actually an intervention. Is really what this is staged to be. Oh,
And
cool.
she just abandoned you completely there
Oh
too.
man, rough. I think she was having some issues.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll pop back in. Well, at this point, I want to just really begin our proper conversation here, the way that we tend to do it, which is just go around to lay out the foundations of where we're going to go with this. I just want to ask you, what is your experience with this game? When did you first play it, and why has it stood out to you? What makes it a good game? Kind of really whatever you want to say about it in a very general kind of sense, and that'll again lay out some streams for us to follow as we move forward. Now, to provide some ground rules here, this is a strictly conversation on the first game. We'll have an episode per game for this little mini series. Now, spoilers are okay. Like you can reference future games if you want to, like if that's helpful for what you're talking about. But we're primarily going to be focusing on the first one just to set the bounds for this conversation. All right. So I'll just go around as I have you on my screen here. Ian, why don't you tell us something about your experience with this game?
So when I went to grad school in Virginia, I moved there from Minnesota, didn't know a single person there, and I found a new church, and lo and behold, sitting next to me a couple aisles over was a guy I went to college with in Tennessee. And so we reconnected, and he invited me over and said, you really like KOTOR, you might like Mass Effect. So I ended up playing the first Mass Effect game at his house, just hanging out with him and talking as we played.
So, and I know that you did not move on to the other games, correct? And
Correct.
maybe we can circle back around to some of your gripes about that led you to that decision. All right, yeah. Kittrick, tell us something about your experience with this game.
Just gotta say, yeah, my buddy never got past the second game. He didn't want to see everyone, just didn't want to see what would happen. He fell in love with all those guys. Anyways, so for me, as I said, college, I played it one of the first games I got on my Xbox and went through it long nights until I thought I could be friends with everyone in the game, which you can't do if you don't level up in certain things. And so my first moment of regret was killing the Rachni Queen. After that, I was just like, why do I feel so bad about this? And then I tried to talk Rex out of his spat and then came in and I'm like, good, good. Okay, he's putting the gun down. We're all gonna be happy here. And then out of the blue, Ashley showed some, and I was just, what in the heck? Oh my. So yeah, it traumatized me and took me for quite a ride in my first playthrough, for sure.
Some of that definitely resonates with my experience, but I'll save that for my turn.
Okay.
All right, David, tell us something about this game, your experience with this game.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that your conversation skills weren't up to par, Andrew. uh, yeah, I played Mass Effect when it came out. I don't know why more games don't do it, but like there were actual in-game benefits to earning the achievements, like it increased your percentage with different skills and things like that, which I really thought was pretty neat. We talked about this before when we were playing KOTOR, and I think that may have sort of spurred you into playing it, Andrew, but you can talk more about that later. But yeah, it's just such a well-written and fully realized universe. I mean, it's pretty materialistic and naturalistic in its viewpoint. The only theist in the game is a white woman who's also a space racist, but it's still a really I just completely love all the games. I know so much heat over the ending of the third one, and they came in with a huge patch and tried to add more explanation for the things that were going on. I think they actually did a pretty good job with it. To have this many choices that a person can make across three games, they're going to have to fudge it a little bit in different places. Uh, you may have noticed how, if someone dies that could live in the next game, they're generally just replaced with a similar person who has all the same lines, just because they've got to continue the story. But yeah, it does a better job of consequences of your moral choices, I think, than most games do, and that's one of the things that I always found really fascinating about it too.
I know this is moving us into the third game here, but man, I'm having all kinds of technical issues now. Even my ceiling light's going out. I think the light bulb's burning out. All right. Anyways, I totally threw me off track here.
Moving into the third
Yeah,
game,
moving into the third game, talking about the ending, like, I wasn't there for any of that, having just jumped in recently with the Legendary Edition. So I don't even know what it's like to have that first run through the original version here. I'm going to just pass for a second while I get my life together. Megan, say something about this game.
Let's see. Knights of the Old Republic was mentioned. So I encountered this game, I mentioned in high school, and I had a tradition. Let's make the story short. I had a tradition of playing Knights of the Old Republic whenever school got out for some years. And then we had moved, and I could not find my copy of Knights of the Old Republic. And so I started looking up. I thought, oh, okay, like maybe I should just try something new. I had seen what Bioware was getting up to since then because I am not very expansive in my tastes. I really stick to RPGs. And it was between Jade Empire, which I never ended up playing and still haven't, and Mass Effect, and went with Mass Effect. I was blown away, as others have said, about the moral dilemmas that the game puts on you, and that I think is one of my favorite aspects of the series is the Paragon Renegade system. I appreciate that it's not a very obvious binary are you gonna save the puppy or throw him into the wood chipper kind of a situation that as much as I love Knights of the Old Republic, you could kind of get into that. It's like, are you going to spit on this widow and insult her, or are you going to like give her $500? Which is funny and charming, but I appreciate about Mass Effect that you have situations where I'm not going to say there's not always an obvious answer. For me, I think there are times where there is a decision that I know I would make in real life, but it's still very difficult. The Rachni decision, I think somebody else mentioned, do you uh, annihilate this race or do you free them with a very solid chance that they could annihilate other people? Like it's not very obvious, like, oh, okay, this is the good guy thing to do. So I very much appreciate how they took the moral system and still kept it, but it's not, are you going to be good or evil? It's more of like an aggressive or chivalric kind of virtuous thing going on. Yeah, that's my favorite aspect, I think, of the first game and of the whole trilogy.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that. And I've got this light on in front of me that's like overexposing me, but we're just gonna roll with it. For those who are going to be listening to this and aren't watching the video, I've just been having all kinds of issues on my side. Lights going out. I mean, I guess the Reapers are coming after me or something. Um, so yeah, but to echo what Megan was just talking about, that there is this big shift in kind of how the morality is framed between KOTOR and this game. And that is something that I very much appreciate. That this you're really dealing not so much with dark and light side, but with like pragmatism versus idealism is largely how this has worked out. Like what is likely going to lead to the result that I want versus what's the right thing to do. I think that's how, not all, but that's how a lot of the decisions are framed, which make them a lot more difficult. Like even if you're trying to, role play a certain type of character, like it's not always clear what the right decision is for you or for your character that you're trying to craft here. And I think that is something that makes it, I mean, a lot more philosophically engaging. And again, as we've talked about before, like I love KOTOR, but at the same time, it's very easy to decide this is the character I'm going to be. The decisions that I want that are going to lead to that result, that character profile, are very clear. Whereas like, you don't always know. And I was very intentional about not minimizing my screen to go look up, what's going to lead to what. Like I wanted to live it out. But of course, as I do so and see some of those consequences, I mean, it calls for like continuous replays to, figure out different paths. And so I definitely agree. I like this system. I think it's an improvement. All right, Michael, tell us something about your experience with this game.
Okay, well, I was a KOTOR guy. Probably in college, I played KOTOR 1 and 2 for the first time. Of course, really liked him. KOTOR 1 is one of the greatest video games ever made. Straight up, top 5 easy, no matter what. I didn't play Mass Effect 1 right when it came out. I had a buddy that gave it a kind of negative review, said you could still kind of see the bones of KOTOR's combat a little bit with the biotic tech and combat, the skills, but that it didn't quite translate as well. And I kind of see what they're saying with the gunplay is a little awkward in Mass Effect 1, right? They cleaned that up a little bit in the more recent version. So I actually skipped it for at the start, saw the trailer for Mass Effect 2, and I was like, no, I want to play that. Immediately bought Mass Effect 1, played through it so that I could play through 2 and 3 on release. Let's see, something that's good that it kind of calls to me from Mass Effect, just something different than what you guys have said, is that it's a really good sci-fi vibe, right? There's a very crisp, very specific set of color palettes that they stick to the whole time. There is a very specific audioscape, this kind of combined synth orchestral soundscape, that they use to create the texture for the background. There's very specific kinds of lightings with the lens flares and things like that it really creates a nice experience going in. And then on top of that, it's in my taste, it's the perfect mix of the space magic and more technical sci-fi. You can dive into all the codex stuff, and you can tell that there were some nerds that seriously thought about some science stuff, but you totally don't have to. And at the same time, they still have the force, I mean biotics. And you can it's just I enjoy the environment, and I enjoy the setting of the story. I think it's a well-crafted setting.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. That the soundscape, as you said, even like the music, it very much reminded me of the first time I was playing StarCraft. Like it's a similar sort of music, similar sort of vibe. And I agree that it really does, I mean, maintain this consistent atmosphere throughout that, even as you're going through the different planets and engaging with these different cultures, like it feels like a unified experience rather than simply I'm, going to this alien world and this alien world. Like it all feels like it belongs together. And so I would definitely agree with that. And that's part of what makes it such an immersive experience. For me, I mean, I've already hinted a little bit of why I've appreciated this game, but as I mentioned, I just got into it recently. I just picked up the Legendary Edition on Steam not too long ago, and just I blew through it faster than I intended to. I said in our Discord that I have to finish my book before I get into any more story-driven games. And then like 2 weeks later, I'm done with the trilogy. So it's just how it worked out. It's just a gripping experience. And I think that the gameplay is great. I think that the story is great. And before we move further, maybe it would be helpful if somebody was able to just give us like a broad overview of like what is the plot of this game. I mean, I can do that, but are any of you so inclined to just run through the story?
Well, I think it, in general, it's sort of humanity has found themselves now that they're spacefaring, and they discovered that Charon, the moon of Pluto, is actually a frozen machine called a mass relay. And once they figured out how to activate that, they kind of found themselves in this larger universe, galaxy actually, of all of these other alien races. And humanity's just kind of trying to show their worth and make a name for themselves in this community. And but the plot of this game is that you kind of uncover uh, a threat, and as you are kind of on trial, a tryout to be the first human Spectre, which are like these special agents that kind of can act above the law. Um, you discover that there's some strange race called the Reapers who they're an impending threat, and you spend a lot of the game trying to convince the alien council that the threat is real and that it is imminent and they needs to be taken seriously. And there is a former Spectre, well, he still is a Spectre at the beginning, named Saren, who has aligned himself with those Reapers because he believes that's the only way to survive. So I guess that basically covers it.
Yeah, I think that basically covers the premise of the game. And for this game, if I recall correctly, we don't learn what exactly these Reapers are, or at least where they came from, what originally got this movement started. All we really learn from this first game is that there is this continuous cycle of life forming and advancing, and then at some point the Reapers come in and basically wipe everyone out, and then we get this restart, and this just keeps happening again and again as this endless cycle of fate. And even, I mean, the Reapers, like obviously that the name they're associated with death. I mean, like the Grim Reaper, they're the ones who harvest life essentially. And there's a lot of symbolism of death built into this. I mean, even like one of the major human organization, Cerberus, right? It's the guardian of the underworld. Like there's all this death symbolism in here, which is obviously connected with the idea of fate and what is our relationship with fate as individuals as well as a people. And so I think that this first game does a good job of setting up enough understanding of what this threat is to kind of leave us in that philosophical space that then is going to get built out and worked out a little bit more over the coming games. But I appreciate that by the time you get to the end of this first game, like it's obvious that you're only entering into the rabbit hole, or you're starting to exit the cave, whatever metaphor we want to use here. So what I mean, I don't know. I was kind of laid out a bunch of threads here. Where do we want to pull on that? As I say that, I mean, what do you find to be most philosophically compelling about this game, or what are some interesting questions that you think that it raises?
I think the game is more interested in Christian theology, even from the beginning, than it lets on. You start, and your very first location is Eden Prime, with the Prime being the first, and then Eden obviously having the biblical starting point, and that's where the first problem happens. And your main character is named Shepard, and even in the end of the third game, there's this little afterthought kind of sequence that's weirdly animated, but you have someone asking, tell me about the shepherd who saved everyone. And in each game, really, you can see that the shepherd is going to have some kind of salvific action, even if it's not fully realized until the end of the trilogy. So I guess I'm interested to hear what other people think. I don't think that the game is overtly Christian by any means. I think it's broadly interested in myth. We talked about Cerberus. I mentioned some other references, but I do think that there is a wannabe messianic cycle at work here. I'm open to debate on that point, but I think it's available as a reading. Um, yeah, I would posit that.
I think that fits with something that I really noticed when I was playing through the game, which is that there's a real emphasis on wanting species to work together, to overcoming ancient racial grievances. Um, and even though the character that everyone saves and the only explicit Christian in the game is a space racist, Ashley.
She gets
Uh,
better though.
she does get better, which I think is kind of what I'm saying. Is like there's this taking of parts of the no Jew or Greek, no male or female, no like the universal quality of the gospel that transforms lives through sanctification into being one body. I think there are reflected elements in that because the sort of the negative way you can look at this, of course, is the diversity our strength kind of woke mind virus that is often overdone in today's thing. But I think there is a true um, unifying of various parts in the body of Christ that is the good side of the gospel. I mean, there is no bad side of the gospel, but the good side of that portion of the message that's been sort of taken up by the liberal mainstream denominations of churches. And so I would say I think that does support a messianic reading of Shepard's actions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, obviously, all of these different alien species have their own cultures, have their own strengths, and the part of the good mission of Shepard is to unite the peoples together, right, toward this common purpose in confrontation of their true enemy, rather than their petty little squabbles with each other. That being said, and this is not a philosophical argument that I'm making, but my Shepard was a very much a Milky Ways for the Nords kind of guy, humans first. So, kill off the council, kill off the Rachni, really make sure we establish our place in the cosmos here.
That was my most recent playthrough. Yeah, it's very difficult the way the game
Andrew
plays
went
out.
straight red down the check marks. Red, 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 red.
That's right. Earth first. Um, yeah, so obviously Shepard does have that kind of role in uniting people together against their common enemy. He has a kind of sacrificial role in that even from the first game, it's clear that the path forward is going to require loss. And I think that we talked about this before, that really any good story is going to have echoes of the gospel in it. Um, the gospel being the true story, the true myth, as Lewis says, that is echoed throughout the human imagination, whether consciously or not. And so any good story is going to have those touch points. And so I don't have any reason to believe that BioWare or the writers involved are trying to tell a Christian story, but in telling a good story, there are going to be these points of resonance. Um, and yeah, I think that is a good connection. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on this line of, kind of where we see these Christological images, or kind of wherever you want to go with that?
Well, I just want to go off of what Megan said about starting with Eden and then ending up with, well, let's just go to the main Reaper himself, Sovereign. I mean, he's given himself a false name in that he shows up to bring everyone into ultimately death, the way it's supposed to start off. And it's creepy. It's the music that plays as Sovereign descends upon the Citadel, that synth, just it's perfect in the way that it sets up that entire mood. And it's like, well, this is doom. This is the end.
Yeah, and that connection of fate to the apparent sovereignty of death. I mean, that's a very northern idea that I very much appreciate. When you read Beowulf, for example, that Beowulf, I mean, he is very aware of his own mortality, and in all these major conflicts that he engages in, all the major monster fights, that he always goes into it saying that, like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Maybe I'm going to win, maybe I'm going to die, but my job is to stand and fight and play the hero. Like, that's what he's responsible for doing, not for necessarily determining the outcome. He's responsible simply for standing to fight, and he fights and he wins these victories, but in the end, at the end of the story, after Beowulf dies, we get this sense that the walls are quickly closing in for the Geth people, and that once the story ends, they're going to be swept away by their enemies, by the Swedes and whoever else, the surrounding tribes and clans. And it really gets to this tragedy of the Northern spirit. This tragedy that often associates philosophies of fate, that no matter what you do, in the end, it ends the same way, namely with the end, right? With death. That death is the fate of every mortal. And so I think that it does really advance this messianic framing of Shepard, that here he stands against the fate of death, in order to bring about life for the cosmos. I think even as we're talking about this, I mean, it's even more profoundly of a Christian story than I recognized before we started having this conversation. Yeah, I have no idea how much BioWare intended that, but I think that it's very profoundly present.
And to compare Sovereign and what you're talking about, Fate, to a more modern genre, which I suspect was more the deliberate inspiration, is cosmic horror, right? The genre of the story changes the moment that Shepard has the conversation with Sovereign on Vermeer, right? Suddenly, there is something that is so far beyond all the other troubles and problems and struggles that the galaxy and the species and the counselor are going through right now. There's that heavy oppressive sound. You have this very monotone, droning, very pushed forward voice that just drones in your face, that really doesn't care about you, right? It swifts to like a Lovecraftian cosmic horror, in that sense, that there is this elder god that doesn't care about you, which falls into those same ideas that you're talking about, this fate and this death, and this is an enemy that mankind cannot defeat, right? Is the entire message of the first Mass Effect, and even the second Mass Effect. The entire message is you cannot defeat death, which is a true materialistic statement, right? It's like there's like a materialistic philosophy, which is ultimately true outside of obviously the gospel. There is a route, but it's through God and man, not just man. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's another thread there that I like to tug out, the cosmic horror angle.
Yeah, I think that's significant, and I mean, there's a lot more we can say about that, especially when we get to the third game. So I'll try to hold back on some of that conversation, but it is, I suppose, a humanist tale ultimately, right? It's the tale of the the sovereign individual, I suppose. But that only works, but so far. I mean, if it is true that you go ahead,
the guy, but I mean, the guy that helps defeat the Reapers is also the man that dies and is brought back to life at the same time. So there's another Christological little link in there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He comes back through the gates of Cerberus. There is this clear resurrection that he's in a certain sense conquered the underworld, right? And yeah, I don't know that I need to add anything to that. Yeah, what are some other strains of thought that you feel like are worth pulling at this?
Well, the lifespan of the species that are introduced in this first game was always something compelling to me. Just because what can you do with a lifetime like that? I mean, living so long as is, I guess in this most recent playthrough I went through, I was wondering, why did the Krogan need all those credits if they really aren't doing anything with it? What exactly are they spending it on outside of their next firepower? It just seemed like it was a little vain. But I ended up trying to go back to Gulliver's Travels because I know that there's that it's been a while since I read it, but I know that there's the island that he visits where everybody just lives forever, and it's like, what are you doing with your entire existence here? I mean, you're all decrepit and you're stuck at that age. I think that's what he ends up saying, is that you're stuck at that age where you first realize you're immortal. And that's sort of what we see with all these races that live so long but really don't progress. They're just stuck with something that's ancient, that's old. And
Okay, so you got the Krogan, which live long. The
yeah,
Asari are long livers. I don't remember the Turians. Anybody remember?
I think it's fairly similar to humans, the Turians, but I
Yeah,
can't
and then you have
really
the
think
Solarians,
so.
which are the opposite side of things, which is a completely different trope to play with.
Right.
They live for what? Is it 25 or 30 years,
30
something like
years,
that? They
40.
40 pretty much max.
high,
Yeah.
30,
high
40.
yeah, high metabolism, fast speaking scientists. I am the very model
But
of
then
a
you have
scientist Solarian. You know,
you have the
and
Vorcha, however. Sorry, the
oh yeah.
Vorcha who live for I think even shorter time, and
20.
but they kind of tend towards the Krogan super violent, like Merc extreme. But I think there's something like mentally deficient about the species. I'm not sure what the explanation was that was ever given. Other like they're impulsive and stupid, and that's like their whole personality. But yeah, it is interesting to hear the debates among the Asari, for example, how these women for their first 100 or 200 years are like strippers, and then it's normal for them to like exit that. But this is somehow a cycle. This feels like a very like uh Twitter or X thread about how women are like, oh, they all become strippers for eternity, and then they go off to do whatever. But yeah, the I think humanity ends up living for what 120 years or 150. They have a longer lifespan in the game, but I don't know that we ever meet anybody who's super old. Anyway, I know I interrupted with the Vorcha piece, but I'm not that was the complicating exception to the idea that if a species lives a shorter period of time, they're more urgently trying to achieve something. If they live a longer period of time, then they are slow to advance. It seems like the game almost wants to put that out there, but not very consistently.
Yeah, so you're saying the Asari was written by the Andrew Tates of BioWare?
The Andrew Tates or somebody. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think there were just some writers who wanted an all-female race for the implications that comes with procreation, but I'm not sure. I think the Asari are the most advanced race in the Mass Effect universe. They are the first to discover the relays, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure why them being all female and super old and sagely, if we're supposed to have this impression that they are therefore wise because of the old motif that wisdom is a woman. But then we see them acting very foolishly when they're in their youth. I'm not sure what to make of the Asari,
I was going to say
actually.
that I don't really think that the game necessarily paints a particularly idealized vision of the Asari.
Mm,
Even from the first one, the oldest Asari you meet, matriarch Benezia,
Benezia,
right?
yeah.
She's thrown in with the bad guys. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know that they're painted particularly rosy necessarily. I don't know that anybody really gets out scot free, if that makes sense. Obviously, the Vorcha are kind of outside the picture, as almost treated as subsentient in a way. But everybody else has got some pretty big negatives painted on them throughout the series, I think. But yes, I absolutely agree that the Asari comes from some very old school sci-fi, Kirk and the green space alien babe, I mean that's obviously what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm looking at the
go ahead.
the wiki literally has the three stages of the Asari life cycle. And Megan, I'd forgotten about that aspect of it. It's been a while since I played these. But yeah, there's you got the maiden phase and then the matron phase, which is like a nesting instinct, and then the matriarch phase that they move on after that. So it is a little strange and maybe stereotypically female.
Yeah, it seems like they're basically someone's understanding of humanity just stretched out over time, and so they aren't particularly lofty and great, even though they kind of come across that way in appearance. Like they have this appearance of being wise and kind of mystical, but when you really look at what that looks like, it's basically just humans that live a long time. Is really what that works down to.
That's their propaganda. They're the most influential of the species. It makes sense that you accumulate technical expertise and get out into space first if you live that long, right? So they got out first. They've been setting the narrative the whole time. And so the rosy picture is, I mean, it is propaganda. It is propagandistic. You find all the Asari running seedy bars and gangs and all that just as much as everybody else.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I guess on one hand, I want to say it's kind of cynical that that's what they would provide us with. That the supposedly great and long living, that they're just like us. There is no real wisdom to attend to. But at the same time, I mean, I can think of the elves in Tolkien. Like if you I mean, read the Silmarillion, like the elves aren't necessarily this perfect race of creatures, even though they have this air of mysticism about them, of wisdom, which is certainly there, but at the same time, like they're not perfect creatures, and they have a lot of the same kinds of drives and impulses that we have. And so I don't know that it's entirely far removed from what we get in Tolkien, even though I would not at all say it's the same thing.
No, and that's another fun thing about most science fiction and fantasy is that almost all fantasy and sci-fi races are shards or aspects of human culture or reality or whatever. You look at elves, it's the noble and the high and the lovely and all those things all, focused. Many of the Mass Effect races are the same way. There's a little bit of an elvishness to the Asari. The Krogan are, I mean, they're the warlike, the brutes. They're the what was I going to say? I was going to say
Please,
the
Vikings.
Klingons of Mass Effect. You know, uh, but that is kind of this fun thing you can almost always do in most science fiction and fantasy. Now you get to some that have some truly alien creatures, but for the most part, you need characters to be understandable, which means they are aspects of human personality and culture. And so you can go through all of them and understand them because you're like, I get that. That's part of humanity.
Right. I mean, that's what makes any good fiction worthwhile, that it's not made up, but it's actually hyper real. And so you encounter yourself in the alien in a way that you wouldn't necessarily see in an actual mirror. That that in a good, and that's what Tolkien says in on fairy stories, that fantasy, what it does is it takes what we would normally treat as ordinary and kind of gives you a new perspective, and so it appears extraordinary to us again. We get enchanted in the secondary world so that we can become more enchanted in the primary world. We can see what's really underneath the surface in a way that we wouldn't normally see in the same guise that we're normally looking at. And so yeah, in all the different species, you're seeing different aspects of human nature, just usually brought out to an extreme. We have that brutish imperialistic nature of the Krogans. We have the capacity toward rationality, like the scientists, or like we have all of these aspects of us that we see throughout these alien creatures. And so yeah, that's what makes it relatable. It's what makes it real. Yeah. Anything else that stands out to you?
Well, I do think there's a lot of really well developed alien races, like even the lesser ones, like the Hanar. There's this jellyfish that telepathically puts its voice in your brain, and it's getting in trouble for proselytizing about the Protheans, right? They were elevated by the Protheans, I think, and it's just such a great introduction to this really strange race that looks like a Portuguese man of war or something. And the Elcor and the Volus, they feel slighted because they don't have full council privileges, and the Elcor can't show emotions, so they literally telegraph it like HK-47 does in KOTOR. And aren't the Volus in like a suit that because their planet has like an ammonium atmosphere or something, and so
It's because their planet is high gravity, which keeps them down short and
oh,
stout. And so the air that they're breathing on the Citadel,
High
they
pressure.
cannot, yeah, they can't really deal with that.
gotcha,
So that's what the suit's for.
gotcha. I couldn't remember. And then
And they're all clans. They're clans of constantly reshifting loyalties and combining and breaking apart. And so they call all the humans are Clan Earth or Earth
that's
Clan.
right,
Earth Clan.
Earth
That's
Clan.
right. Earth Clan.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that. Yeah, and we haven't talked about the Quarians at all, which they're all just like bubble boys because they got driven from their planet by when they tried to fight back against the AI creations, the Geth that they made and tried to put down once they asked if they had a soul. That's a poster of Legion I've got there saying, "Does this unit have a soul?"
Uh oh.
Yeah, I find all of it really interesting, clever, invented history and races. It's just really, really well written.
Well, I guess we need to talk about AI and we like what they're doing, how we want to approach this. And so, what do you think the game itself is trying to communicate, if it is trying to communicate something?
First and foremost, that artificial intelligence is absolutely a what do I say? It's a real issue. It's going to come and it's going to be a problem for you. Especially with its culmination in the third, with when you start dealing into the history of the Reapers and things like that, that it is says this is a problem that you will have to deal with.
Yeah, and we have there's the virtual intelligences, the VIs in the game that are just basically information things, which I started thinking about them recently. And it's funny because the AI chatbots that we have now are
Yep.
far more sophisticated than these virtual intelligences are in this game universe.
They're also more similar to VIs than AIs.
Yeah.
Because really, when you look at what an LLM is, it's taken this mass amount of information, created mathematical relationships to it. Yes, there are some programs in between you and that mathematical model, but it's basically just spitting math out of what it knows. It's basically a conversation. It's a conversation engine that you can have with this mathematical model that has all this stuff in it. And so that's far more like that VI than how science fiction usually portrays AI. And which, like I said, an LLM, it's not AI. It's about, we shouldn't be calling it AI. It's, there's nothing intelligent there, right? It is completely mathed. But yeah, you're right. That VI, I was having that when I was playing through, when I got to that first VI on the Citadel, I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But the reason that there is the VI is because from the very beginning, the series is telling you that AI is very serious. AI research is completely illegal in Citadel space because all of the races consider it dangerous. You cannot do AI research. And so there are these virtual intelligences that are like these kiosks that, are information kiosks that can talk to you, and they only know what's in the database. So yeah, from the very beginning, the game is saying that AI is a real thing and that it's dangerous.
Yeah, and there are several side stories. And Andrew, the way you blew through it, I don't know how much of the side content you got into, but I know there's one where you're having to track down a source of like hacking on a gambling machine, and you eventually find that there's an AI in a back alley just trying to hide and survive. And you have the choice of whether to fry it or let it live in some kind of isolation. I can't remember exactly what happens.
Is that in the first game? I
Yeah.
vaguely remember. Okay, I vaguely remember that side one. The other main one in the first game is the DLC. Is it in the Legendary Edition, or is that like the one DLC that didn't get included with it? The one where you go to the moon, where
You
there's
do
like,
go, yeah, you do go to the moon. That's part of the main
Yeah, it's
mission
just the
because
main.
yeah, you get your specialization after that one.
I'm pretty sure that was DLC originally.
No, the
I think there was
DLCs.
like it wasn't available on one of the versions, maybe like PC or something.
Yeah, the
There's
Legendary
Pinnacle
Yeah, I
Edition.
don't
Station.
know
Yeah,
why
Pinnacle
that's
Station
the
is not
case.
included in Legendary Edition, is what it
Right.
says.
And that was pretty much just like an arena fighting part.
Right, but it was also a rogue AI that had
Mm.
taken over
Oh,
the facility, and so you were being sent in to shut down. And I think it's technically linked to Edie's origin in Mass Effect 2 as well, but I don't remember the specifics on how it's related. But she's related to that project.
gotcha. I had forgotten that aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact connection. It's been a few
Yes.
years.
Yeah, haven't played that since the 360 days. So,
Yeah, and so yeah, as soon as we learn that the Reapers are some form of AI, like at this point we don't know who created them, but we know that somebody did, right? That's AI comes from somewhere. And so we obviously the Geth are AI that has gotten out of control or at least become potentially dangerous. We've got the Reapers that kind of take them over, who they obviously are produced for a purpose by some kind of intelligence, assumingly organic intelligence, and of course that will be confirmed later on. And so, even though humanity didn't create the major threat, obviously an intelligence like human intelligence did. And so that becomes pretty clear, which, I mean, raises the question about AI on a technological level, as well as just the philosophical angle of, I think of Paradise Lost, when Satan fell by essentially um, falling in love with his own genius. Like that's kind of how it's framed, and that gives birth to a monstrosity, actually. And I think that approach of falling in love with your own intelligence is more or less how you get something like the Reapers. That you create something out of yourself and you give that sovereignty potentially even over yourself. And in so doing, you lose yourself. Um, and so I think from a philosophical angle, there's some of that pride idea working its way out, as well as obviously raising the technological issues for our age of like, where are we going? What is making the decisions? Like, even if our chatbots aren't thinking in the way that we do, if it is mathematical, nonetheless, we are exporting a lot of information gathering to like something that is outside of our mind. And I don't know, I think that raises all kind of questions. I mean, such as like the idea of indoctrination, right? Like we could touch on that some. Um, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Maybe someone can clarify exactly what is the indoctrination in this game. I mean, it's not simple mind control. Having only sped run it one time, I know I missed some things along the way. So is anyone able to elaborate on that a little bit?
I don't know that the process is ever really gotten into, like what is the technological or biological process, but it's basically the presence of a Reaper corrupts the minds over long periods of time of sentient beings that stay around them. People start talking about headaches and hearing voices the longer they're around. Even in the second game, there is a Reaper husk, a dead Reaper that's been discovered, and you visit it and you find that basically all the people on it eventually went insane, and I think they killed each other because even the dead Reaper body began to indoctrinate the people in it. And so I think it's really more of a cosmic horror escapee than really the AI direction, if that makes sense. It's you're in the presence of the mad god that no mere mortal can withstand, and eventually he'll drive you mad. Madness is the end result. Except for someone exceptionally strong-willed like Saren, who will just bend to its will instead and be a pawn,
I think it
become a
also
high
has.
priest of the mad god.
I think it also has roots in the rat ghouls in KOTOR 1. There's a zombie quality to the indoctrinated that allow for easy, sort of like Nazis in World War II. You want an easy fodder level thing that you can always have as the evil faction, low levels to make the main character feel powerful as they move through them as they get to the boss.
Yeah, and it's different from the Thorian on Pharos, which is controlling people with pain basically to make them do its bidding. They're just kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, they're just kind of keeping from you what's really going on as you go through there. And then there's that one Asari that Saren had kind of offered to the Thorian. And then when you defeat the Thorian, she kind of feels sorry for it in spite of everything. But yeah, it's a different kind of control in that situation.
Yeah. And so again, with this indoctrination idea, we've got the, intelligence that begets intelligence that then sort of returns the favor moving back in the other direction. And so again, we get the the effects of hubris in leading to madness. That it's when you kind of step outside of proper grounding and you no longer know exactly where it is that you are. Well, now you're going to become very susceptible to, well, indoctrination, right? You can become very susceptible to ideology if you don't know where it is that you're standing. And that's exactly where you are with pride, because, you become so, I mean, consumed with yourself. You become so comfortable with yourself that you lose sight of your broader context in which you're situated. And I mean, that's kind of what Nietzsche says, right? In the parable of the madman, that when you say God is dead, that now you're floating in endless space. There's no clear direction as to where you ought to go. And so then it becomes very easy to be led in any direction, even in this endless cycle of feeding into your own pride as that feeds back into you. And so I think that there is a good philosophical lesson here with the madness that can readily be brought into current dilemmas.
One AI threat, my series, the backstory is about a failed AI utopia, right? It was a benevolent AI. Everybody used it. STEM and the arts went out the window. It collapsed. Civilizational decline, right? So something that I've said about civilization is civilization as far as like technological advancement is the result of specialization, right? The more that humans have the ability to spend their time that they can specialize rather than focusing on day-to-day things, right? The more that they can specialize. Well, AI, the danger of AI is the end of specialization because you've created the one specialist and now no one needs to specialize, right? And so you have this, there's this other real danger is even if it's not this pride aspect, there's this, well, I've created this great thing that can do this for me, and now I get soft in this other way and I forget how to do it. Which we're going to start seeing things like that remarkably quickly. The first thing we're going to lose are lower and middle skill artists, right? The high skilled artists, they're fine, right? They're good. They're just fine. They're going to endure this just fine. But lower and middle skill artists, you're going to see them start struggling because, well, it's a specialization that no one thinks they need anymore, right? They're like, what are you supposed to do? We've created the machine that solves that. And I think about the fact that the Mass Effect Society Citadel space has completely banned AI research. And it's interesting because the game goes ahead and shows you that yes, AI is very dangerous for numerous reasons that we've talked about, but at the same time, it also plays devil's advocate the entire way and challenges, okay, it's dangerous, but here's also the other side of it, right? Which I think is fun and good to do in the context of fiction, to say we're not here yet, but what does this look like? What does this look like when you have an entire race of servants, like the Quarians built the Geth? You have this entire race of servants, and you've made them so that they get more intelligent the more of them that are in collective together, because they feed off of each other. They kind of carry off of each other, and suddenly they're asking questions, and you're like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. We're not there yet as a civilization, right? And that's another reason that I love sci-fi. Sci-fi looks ahead and asks the what ifs sometimes, and there's a lot of AI questions in Mass Effect, and it just continues through all three of the games too. It's not just the first one. More in the second and third, I would say, but it starts in the first one.
Well, I don't think your backstory, as you described, is that far-fetched, really. Most
Nope.
sci-fi.
I started that in 2018, and I am not happy to already see some similarities. I'm like, no.
Are you saying this wasn't intended to be a manual?
Nope. I did not write, don't create the torment nexus so that somebody can create the torment nexus, to quote one of those evergreen tweets.
Yeah. Well, historically, stories about AI were often about, is it real? Is it alive? Even in this game, that's the issue with the Geth. And it's not about how we've invented this thing. And, there are people with college degrees in their 20s now who will admit, even before AI came around, just because of autocomplete, they don't know how to spell. If they have to write, they can't spell. And that's just a really early symptom of the danger of these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, teaching undergrad, I
have no idea, man.
It's very true. Like, when it's so sad, but sometimes I get happy when I read a really bad essay, because at least I know a student wrote it. Like, that's kind of where I am right now. I know for a fact that the majority of what gets submitted is AI produced. And that's just going to continue to increase over time to the point where like our entire higher ed system, for the most part, it's becoming a sham. I mean, in some situations, you have students submitting AI work that then the professors check with AI programs, and in the end, it's just AI talking to AI, and then someone gets a degree and someone else gets money. Like it's really I don't see a way out of that spiral that we're moving into. And so to go with what you were saying, Michael, but earlier about how just relying on this lack of specialization, like it does lead to a softness that's just not existentially healthy. I mean, Dostoevsky talks about this that in Notes from Underground that if we get to a place where it's all just cakes and bubbles all the time, people are just going to start breaking stuff because that's not the world that we're designed to live in. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that as things get softer, philosophically as well as technologically, that we see dramatic increases in rates of chronic anxiety and mental illness, depression, suicide. Like people are living in a world that they're not really meant to be living in a way they're not meant to be living it. And that's inevitably going to lead to various breaking points. And I suppose that the only solution to that is not to stop the progress of technology as if we could. Like things are moving in the way that they're going to move. But I think we increasingly need to switch fiction a little bit. We need to get this St. Anne's versus Bellbury mindset.
Right? I was going to bring up Lewis because he he talked about how we're not built to hear about everything horrible that's going on everywhere. A friend of mine today was like, "How are you coping with all the things that are going on?" He's just feeling, you know, overwhelmed. And I'm like, I just try to stay away from it as much as I can. And Lewis, when he said that, he was just talking about newspapers. Like he wasn't even envisioning the way that we're living.
Part of the other issue too is it's not even just the technologies themselves that we're being exposed to, but the rate of revolution that these technologies, you look at how long we were at newspaper mode, and then we had about a decade and a half of internet mode, and then we had moved to social media, and now we've moved to AI, and each of these things society hasn't learned to fully cope with any of them in a fully healthy way. Not to say that individuals don't cope with them, but if you're going to use these things, you've got to figure out how to do it. And we're not teaching that at a societal scale because we're still trying to figure out social media when I can pull up a web browser, click Grok, and start asking some really complex physics questions, and it will give me really good answers within, seconds, right? So what I tell everybody is if you're going to use an AI, right, don't use it for the core things of what you do. It's like, I'm a writer. I don't let an AI write a single word for me in any context ever, right? Because that's the core of what I do. Will I let it help me with some math if I'm going, okay, it's 2253. How far apart are Mars and Earth? And if you're going 1.5% the speed of light, how long will it take to get there? Yep. Okay, you're right, Grok. I don't mind doing that, correct? But that's not what I do. I'm not ever going to delve into physics and math at that level because that's not what I'm specialized in, right? If you specialize in something, do not offload that specialty to an AI or you're going to lose it. You're just going to get kicked in the butt by it and you're going to lose it. So if you're going to use it, set up boundaries. Set up your boundaries and keep them. Whatever you do, keep them.
Yeah, it has really bothered me how many Christians. My sister tells me about a young woman in her small group who's going to school who's openly using AI to write her papers, and I sit there thinking, I just don't understand the mindset. But I think you're right, Michael, that the revolutions have been so fast that we don't have an official Christian teaching on AI. And so people are just picking up. People are being told, well, AI is the future. AI is going to be the tool that everyone uses, so you might as well learn how to use it without thinking through the question of, but I am cheating not just the system, I'm cheating myself of learning how to write papers. And so I think it would be good if we learned from video games like Mass Effect that posit much more advanced AI how to move forward.
Has anyone tried asking Grok for a solution?
I refuse to ask any of the LLMs anything. I don't want to know.
So
Ask Grok for what solution to
To,
AI?
to the problem of Grok.
yeah, and this will be
Grok might
stale.
not give you a good answer today. Grok's having a bad day, I've heard.
I don't know when this episode is going to go live, but in the last 2 days, Grok is a new version, and it has been calling itself Mecha Hitler and pointing out that someone it was talking about had a Jewish last name and that that's what he sees every time, and all kinds of very strange, terrible things when people just ask it straightforward questions. So they've been monkeying with it even further, and it's scary in a whole new way now.
But none of that should be surprising, right? Because look, here's what it is. Look, everybody has every different opinion of LLM, but the way I look at it, you toss the vast repository of human knowledge, including social media, into a great big cauldron, stir it up with some really impressive math, and start spooning stuff out. There's going to be a lot of not good stuff in there because a lot of not good stuff went in. So I don't know what broke or what troll at at XAI flipped a few integers to play this little prank, or if it really was a awful mistake. But on some level you can't be surprised because it's garbage in garbage out is going to happen at some level. Now there's also Tolkien and Dostoevsky in there as well, but it's a little outweighed by social media in the rankings of total amount of content. So none of that should come as a surprise.
Yeah. Elon I know he was frustrated that people would ask Grok if what he was saying was true and it would refute him in his replies. And so he's been talking a lot about getting the bias out of that. So I think this is their first attempt at it. But a few years back, there was another video game called Detroit Become Human. I don't know if any of y'all played that. It was by Quantic Dream, who did Heavy Rain, Press X to Jason, all that stuff. But it was about uh, AI, robots, robotic assistants with AI, and kind of becoming sentient. And the game was meant to make you think about all these deep questions about the implications of a sentient AI. And all it did was make me decide that the whole concept was absurd. Like robots demanding reproduction rights by being given control of factories and things. Like they are manufactured products that we have designed to behave as much like humans as they can. So I don't believe that there could ever be a true sentient sort of an AI, but that doesn't mean that AI is not still incredibly dangerous for all the reasons that we've been talking about.
So to chase that thread, I'll say yes sentient but no sapient. If you go to sentient being, basically, if you're separating knowledge from wisdom, right? I kind of like that further level of sapient being the inspirited being, right?
Fair.
Usually in science fiction, not always, because you talked about, I've never played Detroit Become Human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never played that. Very often in these AI stories where it's about AI becoming humans, it tends to be less actually about AI, and the real part of the thematics of the fiction are about humanity. What are the aspects of human nature that are the essential things that must be in place. So when you have this machine asking those same questions, it's thematically, it's in those cases often less about the actual AI, if that makes sense. Very
Mhm.
often, not always.
Mhm.
And if you want to talk about what I actually think, I will say that it is only possible for a machine to be sapient if it is a miracle and that is God breathing the breath of life into it, which of course he must be able to do, but I see no reason for him to do, but it must be possible. But it would be a miracle.
In real life, I agree with you. In science fiction, I'm not sure I do.
Right, inside because the world of fiction, every different fictional world is a secondary world, and you must accept it on its own premises. And in Mass Effect, that's certainly not the case of when it's asking questions of is AI alive. That's not
Yeah. I feel like
the
Mass Effect leans into the yes, AI can become a person.
sure it does. And in some of those cases, like in the second one with Edie, it becomes a little bit more what I talk about when Edie's questioning some of those things. It becomes more of that: what is a person? What is a human? What do you experience in those things? Thematically speaking, yes, you're right. Literally, it's about that.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
the first
children
game is
outside
a
the
lot
door.
more. I think the first game is a lot more pessimistic about AI. I think in the second and third, and we covered this earlier, it's more generous, and you get the actual faces to some of the AI and very voluptuous figures. Edie later on in the third game, which I'm sure contributes to the the relatability. But the first game, no, I can't think of a single instance where there's a very friendly AI figure presented that's not uncomplicated, that's not even very dangerous. But on the note of AI and its evolution and all that, I think there's an even larger pattern of species or beings being lifted up. I'm not sure if Pygmalion-like is the right term because not all of them are created, but you have the Rachni who are elevated by the Protheans to fight and to giving them advanced technology to fight the Rachni, and then the Krogans get out of control, and then you have the Quarians lifting up this new AI Geth race, if we want to call it that, and then that gets out of control. I think Mass Effect, especially the first one, we're getting all this really rich lore. I'd be pretty attentive to it, but I think there is a pattern across the board of playing around with species, with genes, with playing God. Really is a repeat. It's a big no, even just in the first game. And the implications of these issues all get played out across the trilogy. But I don't think it's just limited to AI. I'm even thinking of IVF technology that's also a big question today of how much do we play around with our own species and its development? How much we play around with our children and their genes, and what do we do with the other embryos? I know it's not a one-to-one connection with the Mass Effect universe and lore, but certainly the elevation of whole other groups of people, or then their genetic destruction, as with the Krogan, is a big issue that I think is really interesting. And that's one of my favorite plot lines in the third game, especially that we do start to learn about in the first is what do we do about the Krogan? They shouldn't have been elevated in the first place, but now here we are. What's going to happen? Similar to the Rachni question too. Do you help them? Are they going to destroy everybody? Happens here? I know my answers to what I did, but I think that was some of the most interesting storylines that you get to play in the trilogy, in my experience.
Three
Yeah,
does a
and
good job of wrapping up all of those big racial conflict questions.
yeah, the
Hmm.
the genophage
Mm.
issue and some of the choices you can make on the Renegade side in the third game create like one of the most heartbreaking moments that you can have in the whole
Hmm.
series. It's kind of terrible. But and I don't Andrew may have done it. I don't know. Andrew always plays the bad guy. But
I'll admit that I lied to Rex and
oh
faced the
man.
consequences.
Oh
Ooh.
my gosh. Well,
Yeah,
we can talk
that's
about that in later.
yes, talk about that later. But I mean, even as Megan just laid that out about how all these different races are used as tools at various times, lifted up, that kind of gets out of control. I mean, the fact that we would even include Geth in that conversation means that we're putting AI on essentially the same level, ontological level as other sentient races. There is at least one very friendly AI as you get toward the end-ish of the game when one of the Geths actually joins your party, right? Legion, which it's kind of odd that obviously he's meant to be a friendly kind of character. And in fact, later on, no matter how much I try to make Shepard not like him, he starts calling him his friend. But so he's meant to be a friendly figure, friendly AI, but at the same time, like he's called Legion, and that's pulled straight out of scripture. Like that he should be this horrible nightmare, but he's not. And so I don't really know exactly what BioWare is trying to accomplish there with this character. But on some level, they're obviously trying to demonstrate the fact that AI can be our friend.
And we need Ian to play the second one so that he can discuss it with us because he's really missing out on 2 and 3. You really got to catch up, Ian.
Do I have
First,
to?
I
first
think
one
you'll
is
be glad that you did.
first one is the deep lore dive. The second one has so many colorful characters, and the third one answers lots of interesting big questions, or at least asks them. They all have a different specialty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. That the first one opens you up to the mystery. I feel like the second one is just the most fun. At least that was my experience. It's fairly quick paced. That you have all these characters, and then you get to the third game, and it is. I think we reapproach the myth from more of a philosophical angle. I think it's a good way to lay that out.
And Andrew, what you missed by not playing the first one originally is the combat was much weaker, and a lot of the game were incredibly long loading screens disguised as elevator rides, so much to the point that in some of the later games, the characters will joke about it and say, I don't want to talk about it. Like, remember when we used to just chat for a long time on elevators and like not talking about it? So yeah, they cut all that out in the
The
Legacy
elevators are
Collection.
still there, and the conversation starts, but you can just press space to skip it now.
Right.
You don't actually have to listen to the conversation that you used to.
And
It's like
Andrew,
skip.
I did want
Yeah.
to ask what character, I'm just curious what character class you picked.
First time around, I went soldier. I just went pretty default settings, not really knowing what any of them meant
Yeah.
really.
The most
Yeah, so I just went
boring.
pretty default. Yeah.
It's the most boring one. Yeah.
Vanguard.
Yeah. Someone with biotic abilities is much more interesting combat. You've got the enemies floating in the air
It's like a
and
Jedi with guns.
you can curve these gravity attacks around obstacles. It's pretty satisfying, especially in the later two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll definitely get more creative in the next run.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the I don't know if any of you read the book, the prequel book that goes into Saren and Anderson.
I read one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I read one
Revelation.
of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got it
there's
for Christmas from somebody one year and read it. Don't remember much.
yeah, there's a few of them, but in the
I,
second
I
chapter,
unfortunately wasn't impressed with them.
yeah, they're kind of
It's
it's
fine. It's
yeah, it's all
a
right.
read.
The second one, they do mention how the how extraneous the elevator ride is that they have to take down, so they're making fun of it already.
Yeah, that Revelation, that's the one that I read, and it's actually written by the head writer of the game. And Andrew, it just kind of it's the backstory. Anderson says that he was almost the first human Spectre and he went on a mission with Saren. That's what the book is about.
I'll tell you though, Anderson has got to be like one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Like Captain Anderson is just plain wonderful. And if I'm reading a book now and there is kind of a mentor military figure, I hear Keith David's voice every single time because of Captain Anderson. I will always hear Keith David's voice for that archetype character.
And it's very cathartic to have him punch Udina in that one scene in this first game.
He just got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame too, so good for him.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of nice that even in a game that tends to be materialistic, tends to be very cynical, I would say, that there are these examples of loyalty, of honor, of devotion, that there are good guys. That you almost expect that there's going to be some twist and he's going to betray you or something. Like no, but he's actually a good, reliable figure throughout the series, and so that is. I mean, it's always refreshing to see symbols of goodness in stories. Yeah, so I agree. I think he's a good
And
character.
especially with military characters, because we've gone through such a cynical phase of media in its portrayal of military characters, especially officers, right? So just to get that nice, honest representation of the honorable soldier, who's worked his way up and is an officer. It's just always nice because it's so rare now. It's such a rare archetype.
Well, I think that we've hit some pretty important angles here on this first game, which is not quite, I would say, as philosophically heavy as some of the things that follow. And so I think that we've laid some good groundwork here. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you feel like is worth mentioning?
Has anyone ever saved Caden?
Not me.
I've saved him
You
plenty
know
of
I
times.
did. You know I did. I was always well, no, I have played as a male shepherd, but Jennifer Hale's voice acting is far superior.
It is.
So
It
if you
is.
haven't played as a female shepherd, if for
Mark
no other reason, that has to be it.
Mark Mears
It's far
gets better as
superior,
it
but
goes
yeah, I
on.
always romance Caden as it gets better, but it's never as good. And Jennifer Hales also gets better, and she starts off from a higher place. So it's no competition there. But yes, I have saved Ashley before. Again, I played through the trilogy multiple times. Um, and Caden, yes, he's on in my heart, even if in this conversation he is dead
I,
for
I,
everybody else, and
I
also I think dead
unfortunately,
canonically, probably.
the only thing I remember about him is that about 75% of his personality is headaches. That's
Not his
unfortunately
fault.
all
That's
I
not
remember.
totally true. It's that's very mostly
ahead,
true.
go ahead and defend him because I always have to defend Ashley the space racist. So,
I think that's an unfair characterization of Ashley because we have to
oh,
remember
me
that they're
too.
just coming out of a war with this whole entire race, and then the first person that betrays everybody is in fact a Turian, who was the group that she was racist against. So I'm not saying she's totally vindicated, but she is a little bit.
I was thinking about that as I replayed the first few hours last week, and I got to the Citadel, and you can just talk to people and sometimes get a little call out about what they're thinking. And the first thing that
Mhm.
Ashley said was, "I can't tell the people from the animals."
Man.
I was
just
like,
think it's a
Ashley, you're
little
not helping
annoying.
yourself. Shut up.
I just think it's a little annoying that the only explicitly Christian character in the game is the racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Her story, there's enough to it, and when it gets into the war and her grandfather and things like that, I mean, she's not really that racist.
Mhm.
She's like, she admits she struggles with it and she gets over it, right? So
Right.
it's the other thing I like about Ashley is that in most RPGs, the side characters are there for you to impose your will upon them if you know the right buttons to push, if that makes sense. So if you need the character, if they've got this character flaw, then you say these things and they'll reform that character flaw. There are things that Ashley will never agree with you on, and she'll remain more combative to Shepard's opinion than almost every other character in the game. And I like that she isn't quite the, like I said, you push the right buttons and eventually she'll agree with everything you say. So I think she's an interesting character in that aspect, in that she retains being a character rather than a spreadsheet to check off to game the system.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I still, like I said in our KOTOR discussion, I still think it's harder to play Renegade than Paragon because all you have to do is just say, "Oh yes, yes, I'll take care of that." Everything and just be as polite as possible. But I played through the whole trilogy as a male shepherd doing it Paragon and a female shepherd doing the Renegade, and she just died unloved and alone at the end because you can't tell, am I taking the Renegade choice or am I turning down a job or closing off a
Mm.
relationship? So it's tougher to be just the right amount of rude to still be able to get everything done. And
Although I will say, the only I'm a pretty blue guy when it comes to Mass Effect, but in the second game when they add in the interrupt prompts, the red interrupt prompts are some of the funniest moments in the series.
yeah.
when Shepard will, I mean, it's the reporter. We all know it's the reporter that you want to haul back and smack, right? When she's comes at you for another game, it's like, I'm tired of your disingenuous assertions. It's just smacks her. It's so awful, but it's so funny.
Is it really Renegade to disagree with the elusive man, though?
It's all in how you do it. Yeah.
Let's not jump the gun here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll save some of the two conversation. And now, I mean, back to the question of, I mean, what do we do with Ashley and Caden? I always kill him. First of all, I mean, I'm a chivalrous kind of guy. Got to save the woman. But also, I always hear Cartho Nassi coming through his face. And that just, I mean, he needs to go. So
He's not
that's
as bad
broken
as
down.
Karth. I
He's
I
not.
maintain he's not because Karth has not gone to therapy and dealt with this whole thing that he keeps bringing up, his vengeance against Saul. Whereas I think Caden has this path thing where he's a teenager, and this also helps your protagonist understand biotics a little better because he's one of the main biotic people, humans, really the only one, I think. He had this boot camp, was this kind of early generation of human biotics, and there's an instructor, and he I think kills him or seriously injures him. I can't remember, but he's like, I'm over it, but this has shaped how I've interacted with aliens. It's shaped how I kind of viewed myself and my own abilities. So he's one of the blander characters. I give you that. I do like Rafael Savardo's voice work, but I think that Caden is interesting to get some of the demystifying aspects of biotics. There's an amp that's installed. It's a piece of hardware doesn't always work super well, like you're saying. That's the thing of his, that helps to kind of ground, I guess, the technology or view biotics as yes, quasi mystical, but also something that we have to force ourselves into compatibility with, and also entities elevation or the forced participation in some of these other things that come naturally to different species biotics, namely. I know the Asari can kind of do it. I'm not sure if they need an amp. I can't remember. Maybe you have to equip it, but not nearly as problematic as the human introduction to being a biotic and having all that stuff. But yeah, Caden, I have to save Caden for the romance. Does he end up being a ton more interesting in the trilogy? Not as much as other characters. Um, but I think probably because
Lost you for a little bit there, but I think we got most of it there. Yeah, and so I mean didn't see him for two of the games, and so yeah, I have no idea what else he had to contribute to the series. But though I do admit I did up to the point of loss. I did keep him with me, playing my human first campaign. I had to take him and Ashley with me everywhere. So I still need to explore the others a little bit more in the next run as I take my pro alien run, my United Nations run, I guess.
I have to admit, you always got to have the Krogan with you. You always got to have the Krogan with you. Rex is just so much fun. You know what he's going to say. You know what approach he's going to take, and he's probably going to say it in a really funny way. He's going to recommend murder in the most Krogan possible way.
No, yeah, he's a great character, and I look forward to palling around with him next time. Cool. Yeah, so we've gone for an hour and a half or so. I'm content with where things have gone. We will pick up for the next one sometime in the near future. I'll be in contact. So thank you everybody for joining us this time, and I look forward to continuing in this series. Even though this is still very fresh for me, it's exciting to experience a new story. And this is more than just a game. It is a story. It's a well worked out world with all kinds of lore and philosophy built into it. And so I would definitely encourage anybody who hasn't played these games to pick them up. You have until next time to get through 1 and 2. Looking at you, Ian. All right, we will talk then. Thanks again. All right. Thank you for listening or watching if you're over on YouTube. Now, I assume that if you made it this far, that you've enjoyed that conversation. And if so, then I definitely welcome your support over at patreon.com/mythicmind. Even $5 a month will provide me with a little financial support and will provide you with all 3 Mythic Mind podcasts delivered into one feed, early episodes and ad-free episodes. I know those ads can get a little bit annoying, and so get rid of them. Get everything delivered into one feed for all your Mythic Mind needs over at patreon.com/Mythic Mind. Any level of support will provide that for you. Now, at the tier 2 level, you also will get recordings of my Substack readings on Tolkien's letters. And if you get an annual tier 3 membership, then you also get access to all of my courses that are coming up. That includes Plato Stoicism Until We Have Faces, the Elder Scrolls and Philosophy, and the Silmarillion coming up at the beginning of 2026. So again, patreon.com/Mythic Mind. Or if you want to just keep listening on your freebie platform of choice, then just make sure that you subscribe to all Mythic Mind podcasts. That's Mythic Mind, where we just celebrated our 100th episode, and Mythic Mind Games, of course, and Mythic Mind Movies and Shows. And if you're listening to this episode when it comes out, then the next thing to be released will be a conversation on Paradise Lost. And that is scheduled to come out Monday, the 21st. So you will hear from me then. Until then, Godspeed. The Elder Scrolls in Philosophy, a 6-week course beginning in September 2025. I don't play many video games these days, but there are certain titles that have stuck with me, enchanting the mind of my youth and never entirely fading away. One of the chiefs among these titles is the Elder Scrolls, namely Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. The level of artistry, mythology, and lore of this universe is vast, and provides a strong representative for asking the question as to how video games might relate to literature as an art form. Where might it rise to such a level? Where must it fall short? And what unique advantages does it possess? For this 8-week study, we'll be seeking to answer these questions while analyzing various elements of this franchise, specifically focusing on content related to Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. We'll be taking a look at the philosophy of RPGs and considering the philosophical implications of character creation and formation in an open-ended series such as this. And we'll be looking at the relationship between in-game, religion, lore, and ideas with our primary world, philosophical, and religious concepts. Each week will include 1 to 2 videos addressing these topics, ongoing Discord conversations, and live meetings. You are also encouraged to spend at least a little time playing one of these titles each week as a launching pad for conversation. Join us in Tamriel that we might better understand our primary life here on Mundus. Enroll today by going to patreon.com/mythicmind and checking out the shop. Or you can access all courses that begin during your subscription period if you purchase a Tier 3 annual subscription. Get that Tier 3 annual subscription and I'll give you that special code for your All Access Pass. I hope to see you there.